You're extraordinary as a client because you started out as an intern, and I was sort of idolized how smart you were and said we should probably be studying with you, and you quite arrogantly agreed. But I'm interested in what you do, and as a 20-year-old, you'd already become some crypto multimillionaire and were qualified to invest in the fund. And it was like, whoa, I've heard about stuff like this, but I've never actually seen it. Anyway, Tom McGraw, welcome. Very nice to meet you. Before you decided to invest with us, were you ever interested in investing in a hedge fund or a third-party manager before?
For sure. I mean, always good to have exposure to different strategies, different ways of money coming in, like I guess as a diversification method.
What intrigued you about us in person? I guess you got more of an inside view than most people.
Yeah, I think that certainly helped, like being able to meet the people face to face, and then also the team, and also get an in-depth look into your strategy. With the dashboard you guys had was quite nice to see in live time. It was much easier to put faith into the project. Also made me feel more comfortable about it because I could understand it in depth and see that there is essentially no risk apart from like the exchange going down, which because I was investing in crypto at the time, I didn't see as likely. So for a risk-free trade, it was very good risk-return ratio.
So when you came into the fund, it was the first of two funds. We had a lower beta strategy, like we were completely hedged, or at least our trade should have been. They didn't all work perfectly. But when you say looked into the screen, was that at the time the exchange monitors themselves, or like later at one point we were doing Web3 stuff where we created our own screens to monitor the assets with smart contracts? I was just curious. I think it was probably just the standard exchanges, right?
Just the exchanges, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's still where most of our money came from. The fancy stuff that work as well as the basic stuff that people have been doing for hundreds of years.
Usually basic is best. That's something I've learned actually over the years.
And not only that, it's sort of tried and true. It's just that you could make a lot more money doing it in Bitcoin or Ethereum than you could in, grain or corn. So when you did actually become a client, did you have any special remarks on the firm? Where did we do well, poorly, compared to other outside managers you'd used before?
Well, I didn't have much experience with outside managers in the past. So I can't really comment on that aspect, but just on this one alone, something I thought you guys did well was the return, which I guess is the bottom line. That was quite nice, especially during the end of that bull run. The fund still managed to return quite well. So when I think if I had invested earlier, I think my return against Bitcoin would have been lower. Of course, I would have taken more risk carrying Bitcoin, but I think I got in at close to the perfect time because my return was higher compared to Bitcoin.
It was an informed choice you made because this was the first time I managed client funds with liquid assets like that, or liquid quarterly assets. There was the most painful possible time. You came in and where you're holding positions that show hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of loss in Bitcoin, even though you're going up in dollars. And then the tides turned, and it's like you're a fisherman. You just started reeling in the fish and everything. And you're like, oh my god, it's like, were we right? There's one other guy also who's really a Bitcoin maximalist. You're open-minded or different about different cryptos, and he was like, Nick, this is the best investment I ever made. We're supposed to return. I gave you one Bitcoin, you gave me back 3 Bitcoin. I was like, yeah, Oliver, actually, we were supposed to give you more dollars. It's like, oh yeah, thanks for that also. Fortunately on the exchanges, when it's going down, the profits pile up in the asset Bitcoin, or there were other assets, but now it's just Bitcoin. Actually, when you interview people, you're supposed to ask them what their initial objections were to buying a product, but you didn't seem to have any objections. You came to us. We should advertise more, I guess. All right, well, listen, thank you. I mean, do you have any other comments on the fund before we catch up more personally?
Yeah, so I guess just to add to the last question, like say a negative that might have changed since then, because of course you returned money to all investors and you started a second fund. One thing I thought would have been nicer on the first fund, which I think would have been more risk return ratios. because I think one would have highlighted it well for yourself, but a more comprehensive report could have
You've
been
been
nice.
highlighting standard financial metrics like the Sharpe ratio or things like that.
Sharpe ratio and like just these kind of like, or the max drawdown, like these kind of risk management related.
Yeah, it wasn't so much a strategy. It was just that we didn't articulate enough what our strategy was or the risks and rewards we were getting from it.
Yeah, I think this is also just because I'm like a quant heavy person and I love numbers. So,
Yeah.
But not, I guess the same thing won't speak to everyone, but personally for me, that's always slightly missing.
Well, including information that we keep anyway is a victimless crime, that's for sure. So we should do that. So, all right. Thank you. Anything else? Do we need to dress better? How's my hair? I'm joking. Oh, I do have so we, as you know, we returned all the money in 2022 because with the basis trade, I just didn't think it was worth it to sit on people's money. And then we embarked on a higher risk strategy. I mean, like the basic proposition now is that on the part that is safe, as you put it, except for counterparty risk, you're making money. On the other half, you can make a lot more money, but you're basically making income. Now, we did our own analysis, back tested for about 5 or 6 years, as to what the maximum return would have been in dollars. But just from an emotional standpoint, how much do you actually want to see at risk of dollar loss? I mean, I know you're not in the new fund, but if you were, how much seasickness could you take?
Hard to say because it depends on for me, it's like I would need to see the whole picture, right? Like, one don't necessarily need to understand the trade, right? Because that can be, and strategy, because that can be IP, right, and protected. But that's what, for me, where the risk metrics, seeing a historical, like, in the history of what would have happened, like, specifically, what is the worst moment in time where, like, if you cash it at that moment, what's the most you would have been down? So, like, max drawdown.
Historically, with the new funds killed it. Like we had about 100% annual return. The worst downturn was about 8%. This quarter has been less. So, I mean, the short of it is, without going into the exact numbers, because I'd have to have it in front of me and I don't, like you're making extra money, the contango trade, when it crashes, because it goes into what you'd call backwardation, where the future is actually cheap. People have a negative expectation for pricing versus the dollar. So the riskier beta side, the covered calls, you still make money. You have income, which is quite significant. It's 18% per annum sometimes to offset in Bitcoin to offset the loss. It works out. I think we have to run the numbers for this quarter, but I think we got hit with about a third of the Bitcoin loss. And the reason is the futures, when they turn negative, since it's a negative bet in Bitcoin anyway, that's extra money for us. You have a chance to get out early and reset as you did with the Bitcoin. So that's an extra thing. And also it's just income. So since there's income on both sides, especially when it turns south, you're looking less than a third of the loss. The other secret sauce about what we do, but I don't know if it'll always be true, is there's been this historic assumption that Bitcoin is highly volatile. And it's built into the pricing, what you'd call the implied volatility in an option price. But most of the time, that's actually significantly higher than the actual volatility. So not only are you selling something which generally you could expect to expire worthless, you're selling it at a premium. So that's kind of the secret sauce. But we need to hard bake that into some numbers, but I'm not just messing around.
I think it's definitely calmed down compared to its older days, right? Also, in this bull run, there wasn't these crazy days where it was jumping up huge amounts like it has in the past. And I think this cycle overall was quite disappointing. I think most of the money went into these shitcoins, all these meme tokens and stuff. What I found very unfortunate about that is compared to previous cycles where there was a true alt season, where money was staying within the decentralized financial system in these synthetic protocols and mortgage lenders and all these, like a real financial economy. The money was circulating around, it was locked in real protocols. This time it was mostly just gambling and people putting money into...
Also some classics like Doge.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I'm joking.
As much, right? But you have this like Solana Casino and stuff like that. And I think...
That was a joke, Tom, but compared to most shitcoins, it's a classic. But I mean, the other thing is, it is starting... I was afraid to some degree... Like, I didn't know how it would turn out because you do have institutional holding now, Like you asked, does Bitcoin act like a stock? Previously, when I looked into it, like 5 to 8% of it between exchange traded products in Europe and exchange traded funds in the United States were actually stock. As far as most people are concerned, you can buy it on your brokerage account, right? It may be significantly higher now. I just haven't looked recently. So I thought in a way that was dangerous because you could use leverage on Wall Street. You know what I mean? So that they could have wilder swings. Except as it turns out, I think there's just probably such a steady demand of monthly purchasing. It's caused more price stability at this point. You get a lot more interesting opinions. I generally like the asset, which is why we're trying to accumulate it. But where it's going next quarter, no idea. That's why we do what we do.
I thought it was really going to grow more. But I think that's why these meme tokens and shit tokens sucked a lot of that money out of the financial system, because people would make money and then pull it out straight away and put it into the next one, or just keep it out. And then people who lost money on these shit tokens just lost money.
I could never get that psyched about Ethereum. Why? Because every time I had the opportunity to use it, which is really just sending Tether for most people, it was slower, more expensive, and worse than the other protocols. Like Solana, whatever else goes on it's pretty cheap and fast. I don't really get it. It's better now that it's proof of stake, or it's faster and cheaper, but I still don't understand. Like, because we actually did some coding to Web3 for the fund for it was one of our few failed projects, but the hedging liquidity pools. It looks pretty identical to, for instance, the BNB chain. Like Solidity is the same language there. I don't get it. Like Bitcoin, I get why the length of the blockchain is significant for security, and it's more iconic. But in the case of Ethereum, I don't fully understand it.
I think that's something they've struggled with a lot, and they have a lot of solutions, right? Like they started the whole idea of layer 2s. They also have like a lot of the ideas that you see other networks use came from Ethereum originally. The reason I love it so much is because compared to a lot of its like competitors in that space, these smart chains, it's the one that's like truly open source and like decentralized. A lot of them, like Solana, is privately owned. BNB is what, like Binance Chain. And then you have some other ones, some other open source ones, but they unfortunately didn't do as well. Like you have Polkadot, but that was very heavily VC backed. Cardano, but like they haven't managed to launch a product in 6 years. Tron, also not decentralized. But Ethereum had, I think probably still has the hugest developer community. Like some very, very smart people working on it. And my thesis regarding that was, if this many smart people like are volunteering towards it, my thinking was it can't fail or it can't not succeed. If you have like a few 100,000 people like pouring effort into it, and then also you had like this cult following a bit of Vitalik, but I think he realized that was a weakness and he's trying to step away. But at the same time, like the guy had very good ideas. But I think, as you said, yeah, it just almost became a victim of itself in the sense that it was, and I notice this now with the company I work at now, we are all nerds who are building it. And at least for our consumer product, for our B2B product, it's actually not a problem. But for consumer products, if the team is too nerdy and technical, you make it too complex and you abstract away from the user and the everyday use. And I think that's what happened with Ethereum. They have these lovely solutions and stuff, but the user just cares about speed and price.
The other thing, I don't know how this applies to things outside of financial markets because I've never really used them for anything else. But the other thing about BNB, and I don't know if this will apply to Ethereum, like we used the PancakeSwap, which is a really good network. Like someone basically recoded the New York Stock Exchange. I was impressed with it. But the thing is, to make it actually work, you needed to take it off the blockchain. The parts where you actually could trade derivatives was a private server, it's like called Apollo X server. And in fact, it was clearly very privately managed, to your point, like because they block US users because of all the crazy security laws, which we hope are changing. So is there a lot of that in Ethereum? For any real project, do you have to do some of the work off chain anyway? So is there really this pure open source play? That's my question.
Yeah, I wonder, like I think for Ethereum, I think they actually do everything on chain. I guess there's now faster chains like Solana and Phantom. You have people building these kind of attempts. But yeah, I think a true order book is just not possible at the moment in like a truly decentralized manner.
I'm not sure that's a terrible thing. I mean, it's still better than like dark pools on American public exchanges now, because like if you go to like again, my where we actually code is at PancakeSwap, but you see all the money going out and coming back, and all the if there's a transfer of wealth that's still recorded on the BNB blockchain. I mean, I guess the private server you do have to account for what happened if you don't watch the order book all the time there. But in the end, you could reconcile and match it with everything else that was on chain. You just take it off for a second.
I guess like if you know which wallet is the off-chain wallet, then yeah, I guess you can essentially track. But yeah, I think like this thing you speak of, like the transparency aspect, I think like of course this won't happen with the central CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, right? I think like invade civilian privacy, right, and have everything on a blockchain that they can watch. But I think in theory, right, a good system would be with all the government accounts on a blockchain, and there's 100% transparency over government spending. That's sort of like what a Doge is in the US is trying to do. But
Yeah.
blockchain.
Sometimes reality imitates fiction, because like right before they must have produced it last year, but there's this great novel from the 60s by Frederick Forsyth, The Day of the Jackal, and they redid it, but that was basically this sort of idealist entrepreneur plot that got the assassin to try to kill him from riches, things like making everything public. It was kind of implied that it was on a blockchain, but it was called River. But yeah, it was sort of like that. Anyway, all right, cool, man. So nice to talk to you. This was meant as a promo, but as usually went off in many directions. Do you want me to kill the say slan to the video and then talk ourselves for a bit? Yeah.
Essentially.
Okay.